For me, I think it's the opposite. For me, it's you troop welfare and mission accomplishment. Because if you take care of your people, they'll take care of you and accomplish the mission.
All right, welcome. We're back on the show here. It's me, your host, Paul Kalamossman. But more importantly, what I'm really excited today is we're going to have some really, I'd say, impactful conversations because we're talking about leadership. And for myself, my first kind of eye opening part of leadership was my time in the military. We're talking to veterans today, to active military members. But today, specifically on the episode, we'll be talking to Ed Nava. I've known Ed for a very long time. He's close friends, close, I'd even say family, but we're going to talk
Right.
specifically about his military experience and his view on leadership. And you're going to get a lot about on today's episode because this is exactly the core of where Ed's at. Ed, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing fine. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Excited to kind of finally jump into this conversation I've been wanting to do for quite some time. If you're watching the show and you didn't see the bio, you didn't read the description, Ed right now is currently a sergeant with the Las Vegas Metro Department. I believe you got over about 20 years with the Marines and the National Guard. But more importantly, tell us kind of take us on a journey with us if you can. I think it'd be cool to start. Where would you say your journey kind of began in leadership?
Well, my journey began being a leader, I think, in the Marine Corps. When I first started in the Marine Corps, I was thrown into a leadership position at a very young age. I was about 19 or 20 years old when I first started as a team leader. And honestly, I didn't know much about it. I went to classes, to courses, but then as I experienced more being in a leadership position, I gained a lot of experience. There was a lot of trial and error throughout my career, and it still is. But I think my first leadership position was in the Marine Corps as a team leader, being a Lance Corporal.
Lance Corporal. That was the first role you remember as a leader in a sense.
Yes, that was the first role that I had, being a team leader. I think I was a little bit squared away, so that's why they put me as a team leader. And like I mentioned before, it was confusing in the beginning because I never had no formal training. It just kind of threw me in there, and I did a lot of mistakes, but I learned from those mistakes, and I think that has made me a better leader now.
That's a good point. I love that you're starting there because I think a lot of times what I've heard in your response as you started the journey is there's that training that you invested in, right? You went to some training, you got trained in some courses. You also mentioned some trial and error. It's about, hey, just kind of just getting out there, right? Jumping in the role, but also being in a role, being in a position, and kind of being still new with it in a sense, right? You're kind of preparing, or we're building our wings as we fly, right? In the air, right?
Right.
as we're in there, we're building our strength with it. What's something you can share with us that really stood out in that specific role?
And that specific role is a lot of times just being the leader of some of my peers because we came in together, and I think maybe the higher up saw a little bit more in me, and they put me in that position. But just leading some of my peers made it a little bit difficult because now we have to separate that friendship from that leadership. We need to get this job done, and I'm in charge of it, and so now I have to tell them, hey, we got to do this, do that, and it was difficult, but that's kind of like what I remember my initial leadership role is. It was difficult.
I love it. I love it. That's such a real experience for a lot of people. If you've ever been in a leadership position, a lot of times we're thinking about the people that report to us, but there is a challenge when we're called to lead our peers, our friends and everything else. If you could think of one or two things that really helped in that transition as you transition from a friend stance with a lot of your peers and then being put in a position to lead them, to build their trust and to kind of help them take your lead, what would be maybe one or two things you'd remember that really helped?
I think what really helped me is that I had the backing of my leaders.
Mm.
When they put me in that position, we had a talk with everyone, and that kind of helped me because now they understood that you know even though we were friends, we had to accomplish a mission, and it was my responsibility, and I think that helped me a lot too. And then also the people that I work with, they were pretty understanding. They understood that it comes. There's a time to be friends, but at work, I was put in charge, so they understood that. So that helped me a lot.
Wow, that's awesome. Having that back, having your leaders kind of get your back is such an important part. There is a little bit of testing, right? When you first get into a leadership role and people push back a little bit, or they, you mentioned a good word, they kind of challenge you a little bit in the role. And I think it's a normal thing, right? As we always hear, but to see that really helped you in that transition, having the backing of your leaders. What was the result? What was the result after? Did you continue to get pushed back, or did you see a point when they pivoted and they really kind of dived in and kind of took your leadership?
Well, initially, just like you said, they kind of challenged a little bit, and I had some friends. Well, actually, people knew that friends were on my team, so they were kind of like maybe seeing if I was having favoritism towards them.
Yeah.
But I made an effort to treat everyone the same. So I
Um,
didn't have no favoritism. And some of my friends did try a little bit, maybe getting out off a duty or something. But I was just being, equal with everyone. So that kind of helped me establish, what, he's not going to have favoritism. He's going to be equal with everyone,
right.
and I gained their respect.
That's such a, I love that I love that the conversation is going there, because favoritism is something that happens too much in leadership, right? And it's kind of this, hey, I'm your buddy, give me some favor in a sense, but really being the leader that holds that consistency and saying, hey, there's a time and a place. And right now, you work really hard to kind of make sure that things are fair and things are just in that sense. Doing that, did you get into any situation that people didn't take from that? Maybe they went bad. I'm just kind of curious, because sometimes that happens where somebody's like, nah, they don't want to, they're too close and they have a hard time seeing you as a leader in a sense.
No, I was fortunate enough that I think everyone that were my friends, and then I became like their supervisor or their leader. They understood, and they actually tried even extra hard because they know that the end result was represented me. So they try to work even harder just to kind of make me look even better. So I was fortunate enough to, not to have that issue.
Right. Support's huge, for brand new leaders, is having that support in the beginning. I remember kind of working with a team that was struggling, and the biggest thing was just kind of encouraging them to really just support the leader, especially in that beginning, that first 90 days, whatever it might take, 6 months, really showing the support there, because anybody that comes into a brand new role, especially in a leadership, that doesn't have that support is gonna struggle a little bit too much more. So I'm glad that you kind of experienced the opposite with it. At this time, let's go ahead. Let's take a quick break for our sponsors. We're going to hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Bridget from the Beehive. Yesterday, Beehive Las Vegas hosted our back to school event. We helped over 100 children receive free backpacks and free school supplies. We wanted to say thank you to our community for all the donations. If you want to find out more about the Beehive, please look for our IG at the Beehive Buzz.
Okay, we're back to the show. Thank you for joining us here, and thank you for the sponsors for today's show for making it possible. We're talking to Ed Nava right now. He is with the Las Vegas Metro, and also coming with over 20 years of service with the Marines and the National Guard. We were just talking about an interesting situation you had in your first leadership journey. I'm curious. I wanna flip the scale and come back to where you're at right now, because we got a good view of how things started in leadership for you. And I want to see right now in your view of leadership. Let's start with this. Like, if you had to define leadership, how would you define leadership today?
But I think like leadership has different definitions, but for me is to just have a group of people, make sure that we have the same mission, that we have a plan, and that we all work together and to achieve that plan. And I think as a leader, you have to maybe coordinate, the people, because we come from different cultures, different backgrounds, different experience, and you have to know your people so we could maybe task different individuals on where they're strong, and maybe help those that are maybe not too strong in a certain position. So I mean, just coordinate everything. You're kind of like the manager almost of just making sure that everyone is on the same page, everyone is running towards the same direction, and ultimately everyone has the same goal. Is to make sure that our goal is clear and how we're going to do it. And I think that's a leader to me. You might have a different definition for yourself.
Well, I think it's really refreshing to hear your definition after your experience, from that time in the military and your current stance right now. I mean, you're even a leader at home, you know what I mean? You're constantly taking that leadership hat in every area that you have in the community. And like you said, one thing that I picked up as you were sharing is that there's this alignment that leaders want to bring people together on. Regardless, like you made a really good point on, we come from different cultures, we come from different stance, different experiences, but the leader's job, the leader's role really is beneficial and really serves the team as they can kind of align everyone together. And that's not the easiest task, right? Especially,
It's not.
I mean, you think about it in the military for a lot of times. I know for myself, and I love to hear from you, is like one thing that was really challenging in the beginning was that you don't in the beginning, when you have different missions and you have different assignments, the people that you're called to lead, you don't have a lot of relational equity with them. Like you don't have years of knowing them from when you were born. A lot of times you just met them in training. You got to build this relational thing really quick. You got to build trust really quick because they're trusting you with, sometimes at the extreme measure, with their life. And other
Right.
times they're trusting you, you know what I mean, with, accomplishing the mission. But we don't have a lot of times in that leadership role that relational equity that you might have in a work environment, by working with somebody for a long time. So that contrast in leadership really stands out. It really challenges the leader. And I like how you mentioned that alignment, what brings them together, for the leader. It makes me curious, like in your experience, if you had to think of something that really helped in alignment, did you ever have an assignment that it was really tough? People were very different views, very different cultures, and you was called to lead and bring them in alignment in that situation?
Well, I think almost every day I deal with this in my job. Because we have people from different backgrounds, cultures, and even on a specific, say, incident, people want to do things different ways. And there's people that are more tactical, other people that are more policy oriented, and they want to do things different ways. And sometimes as a leader, I have to maybe get in the middle ground and say, okay, you know what, we're going to do it this way. But also as a leader, I also take consideration of everyone's input. Yeah, and
Uh,
but at the end, I'm the one that's going to make the final decision of what we're going to do, and the end result, whether good or bad, is going to end up on me. So I mean, I deal with this on a daily basis when it comes to that.
let's go over that really quickly. I think you touched on a really awesome kind of framework that would help a lot of the listeners today that's might be listening today. You mentioned, if we're starting from a place that people are in different cultures, you mentioned that you're open to hearing their point of view, right? You start from a sense of being like a listener, I'd say, right? You're open to seeing their perspective, but at the end of the day, you mentioned you're gonna make the call. Like it's the responsibility of the leader to make the decision, but at the same time to also take the result. Like, hey, if it failed, you're not gonna throw it back on the team. You're gonna say, you know what, as a leader, I made the decision, and you're gonna own that process too. So in that framework, do you think there's anything that's missing? Because I just kind of heard that as you were sharing that experience. It's kind of that openness to get feedback and get their input, but at the end of the day, you do have to make a decision.
Yeah, and I always been told that a bad decision is no decision. So you have to be able to think on your feet, and
Mhm.
sometimes you focus on certain things that you have that tunnel vision.
Right.
and then you have like other people around you that might see something else that you don't see. So and that's why I'm always open to maybe other ideas or maybe hints. Oh, can we do this? Can we do that? Something that I didn't think about. And I think as a leader, the ego needs to go away, because there might be someone that might know a little bit more about a certain thing than you do, and they might have some experience in that specific situation, and you got to take the feedback. And sometimes you got to tell them no. Sometimes you got to tell them you got to do it this way. But at the end, after everything, I always debrief, and I always look at myself, and I always, okay, this is what I think I could have done better, and then I open the floor to
Mm.
everyone that maybe can criticize me,
Wow.
because that's going to make me a better leader. And then we go around the table to find out, okay, what could we done better? What did we do good? So next time if we have something similar, then we could, you know, bring up that experience and hopefully, come up with a better result.
And being open to that feedback, like you mentioned, being open to that question, how can we do things better? That's a good ego check in itself, right? Like a lot, if we have some ego in us, or if somebody is noticing some extra pride, like we're not open to learning how to do things better. So I think that's a awesome point that you brought up, by having that, in a sense, debrief to kind of say, hey, we did the best we could, we made a decision, but we're always trying to see how could we have done things better, in a sense. You said something in the beginning of that section that I don't want anyone to miss, because there's a tremendous amount of value in that point. You said you was always taught that that a bad decision, or how did you say it again? Say it again for me. No
That a bad
decision.
decision is making no decision, like
Bad
freezing up.
decision. So
So
it's that value, or that rut of indecision, of
right,
being stuck and not wanting to make a decision and decide.
right.
Wow, wow.
So with that, like I said, I've heard it a long time ago, and I've heard it several times after that. But that's kind of like my thing. You have to make a decision. It may not be the best decision, but you have to make a decision with whatever information you have.
Wow. We're gonna take a quick break at this moment for our to honor our sponsors and to show you a little bit. And we'll be right back with much more learning here today on leadership with Ed Nava.
With everything changing so quickly, it can be hard to keep your team growing together. Learning better communication and keeping up with effective strategies can be difficult when you have so much more to do. That's why Po'okela Chief Development and Leadership Strategies are here to support you in your training and development goals. Who do you know that is looking to improve your staff meetings, engage one-on-one communication, scale your organization to the next level, or bring in a dynamic speaker for your next event? Now back to the show.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Paul Kellermossman, your host here at Leader Seeds. We are having a really like a real life conversation right now on leadership with Ed Nava. And we just was talking about this rut that you'll fall in making a decision. It's called indecision, and it's just a place that a lot of leaders get stuck. Ed, thank you for touching on this. I'd love to hear with your experience. Let's start with, in the military and even in law enforcement right now. Do you get a lot of time making decisions? Because your day can be a bunch of decisions that you have to make as a leader. And do you get a lot of time to really prepare for that?
No, a lot of times that we make decisions, we might have a few seconds, and those few seconds could be something where it can either turn whatever incident or situation, the opposite way. And but a lot of times, what helps me is my mental preparedness. I always try to run scenarios. What if this? What if that? A lot of times, I do try to maybe read or see maybe videos on certain situations, and I would put myself in that situation to see how I would react.
Mm.
So sometimes, like I said, it's you gotta make a decision. Uh, you know, a few seconds. You might have a couple of minutes, but most of them is real fast. So you have to really think through, and whatever you have, whatever information you have, you got to rely on your training. You got to rely on your experience, and your and basically your decision is going to be the final thing. So it has to be pretty sound, whatever decision you make.
Right, right. Wow. So that I love that connection because I think, well, I know as a younger leader myself, I wouldn't think of making that connection from indecision to kind of a mental preparedness. I would think more like I needed a better skill set, or I gotta improve my, certain talents that I have. And though that might be true sometimes, I think that connection you just made is something of that only comes with experience. That only comes with experience of understanding that indecision is really just kind of this mental stress that we have. And to kind of build that strength, our mental strength is really kind of those prep times that you have, like you said, of reading, or even that's so interesting, like how you said how you'd envision or you'd prepare your mind of a situation before you even there. If you're going to be there, you're already preparing your mind, so that way when it comes, you've already kind of went through it mentally already, and it helps you make a decision in those matter of like a few seconds, you said.
Yeah, a few seconds, and the thing is, as a police officer that I am right now, a lot of times we deal with that a lot where every call, for example, like a domestic, if we go to a domestic, even going to the call, we're already thinking of, little scenarios. Okay, if the person's outside, the person inside, we hear screaming, are we going to in? So all that stuff comes with, mental preparedness. And then as we get to the house or apartment, as we are walking to the front door, we look at maybe places. If the person comes out shooting, where can I retreat, for cover or concealment. So little things like that is mentally prepare. So if anything happens, you already know, what you're going to do. You're not caught by surprise and freeze. So that's kind of
Mm,
like what running scenarios in my head, constantly running scenarios. It's tiring, but you got to do it, because even as a leader, you have to think that way too, because now, if we go to a specific incident or a call or something like that, you need to be already mentally prepared. Okay, how many people do I need? What resources do we need? What orders can I give to make it safe? And it's just being mentally prepared, and I mean, it is, like I said, it is tiring, but it's something that you got to do.
right, right. When you mention that it's tiring, you mention it's tiring in the moment, or you're speaking more of like it's tiring with the preparation of like preparing your mind for those situations.
Well, it's tiring mentally,
Mm,
because you're always in a heightened state of mind,
mm,
even when you're driving. You always doing making those scenarios, preparing yourself. So your mind is always working, and it's something where when I'm working, or if I'm in a situation where my mind, I always have to be working. When I'm done, I just feel very, very tired mentally. So you got to recharge your batteries too. So it's but it kind of helps me, because now, like, whatever scenarios or mental preparedness that I do, I always try to pass it on to my subordinates.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm. I like that. It reminds me of a quote I just seen. I love this so much. I put it on my wall. I've been looking at it every day. And basically it says no pressure, no diamonds. And I think I love it so much because it reminds us like sometimes it's not just looking at the pressure and taking it away and making everything easy. It's about understanding how to best use the pressure. In leadership with decisions, there's a lot of pressure we're going to have, right? The pressure to make a decision. Is it right? Is it the right call? Is it the wrong call? The pressure to be accountable. The pressure, like you say, mentally, you know what I mean? The mental pressures that you'll have with the stresses and, the last minute information and having to decide. But like you're saying, rather than kind of push it away or run away from it or don't respond to it, really looking at it more in a proactive way and saying, look, no pressure, no diamonds. I want to make sure that I understand I can use pressure well, but at the same time, it's in this mental preparedness. Like, how am I best prepared mentally? Because as a leader, I know people are counting on me to make a quick decision and hopefully make better decisions, more good decisions than bad decisions, but it comes with it. If you had to give like an insider, I'm gonna dig deep with here. I'm gonna ask for like a your deepest, most valuable tip that you could give like a new recruit, something that you do that has really helped you the best. It could be one, two, three things, whatever it is, but maybe that new recruit or that new leader in a brand new position, like how you mentioned, we started this podcast today. Somebody's right where you at when you started, and they're feeling their first sense of pressure in making the decision and not being ready for it. But as you know, in those valleys of decisions, what would you say? What would you encourage them to do to make sure that they're mentally prepared for the next one?
Well, in my experience, I say put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to get into new situations. If if you haven't done anything new, but you're afraid, I think all of us are afraid because we are in a comfort zone, and we're comfortable and we don't want to try new things or do new things. Throw yourself out there. Throw yourself out there, learn, make mistakes, and I think you learn from your mistakes. Everyone's going to make mistakes, and just don't beat yourself hard. Learn from those, and then just try to better yourself by learning. Knowledge is everything. Learn and then practice and train. And to me, that I think that's the biggest tip. Is
Mm-hmm.
just to make mistakes, learn from them, train and practice, whatever you're training for.
I love it. I love it. I mean, to be honest, what a place to come from when it's just put yourself out there. It's not like just about, hey, do this before you put yourself out there, or learn this before you put yourself out there, or be this better before you put yourself out there. You're saying get used to being a little uncomfortable, but just putting
Yes.
yourself out there. Just put
Yeah.
yourself out there. I love it. That's some real. Like I mentioned when we started it, we're gonna have some real conversation with 20 years, in the Marines, and now currently, I love it because you're not just leadership for you isn't this post assignment. You are currently leading right now in what you're doing, and in much more ways than just work. Leading at home, leading in your community, and everything else. Let's have some fun really quickly on the next after this commercial break. We're gonna jump into a little fun, something a little different outside of military. I'm gonna tap into a different leadership hat that Ed kind of carries on the next commercial break. We're gonna take a quick break with today's sponsor.
Today, Beehive Hawaii partnered with Pearlside Kapolei for our annual Back to School drive. Thanks to the generous donations from people like you, we were able to provide 100 students with supplies to go back to school. To find out more about the Beehive Women and Teens, check out our website, thebeehivewomen.com, or our social media platforms, The Beehive Buzz.
Welcome back to Leader Seeds. On today's podcast, we're talking to Ed Nava, and we're talking about his leadership experience, also with his military and law enforcement experience. And I gotta say, Ed, this has been really fun because we're diving into some really interesting topics, from indecision and mental preparedness and all that fun stuff. But we were just kind of opening up a part before we went to the commercial break on your different hats. As a leader, we talked a lot about your work assignments, but you also carry a lot of leadership responsibilities at home, as a dad, as a papa, right? As a husband, many different community involvement that you have. And I'd love for you to kind of pick from one of those hats and give us some hindsight of maybe how that role shifts in your leadership. When you are at work and you have responsibilities, and then you come home you have other responsibilities. How do you shift that hat? And let me tell you really quickly, because I used to think leadership was an on and off switch. Like I'm just going to be on when I'm at work and I come home and turn it off. And we all know, if you haven't learned yet, if you listen to the podcast, that's not the case. You know, when you're a leader, you have that on. And if you're going to do really well at work, you bring all that great things you do at work right back to home. One thing we say, and I really believe, is that success at work is nothing when there's failure at home. So I really want to kind of dive into that part and really kind of tap into the well that you have, brother. What would you say? Which one you want to, what role you want to dive into and share with us something about your leadership roles outside of work?
Well, I think being a parent and maybe a grandpa,
Mhm.
because even if you don't think that you're a leader, you are a leader, because young kids, teenagers, grandkids, they look up to you. They look at what you do, what you don't do, and it's very important because you have to set the example at home. Um, like for me, right now, I try to teach my kids, hey, school is important. So even at my age, I still go to school because I want to show that example that, you know what, even though I'm a little bit older, but I still have my goals. I still want to graduate, get my bachelor's degree. So to them, it shows them that, education is important. It's important. And I'm not just saying it, but I'm actually doing it. So as a parent, it's something where, uh, being a leader, it's there even if you don't want it. It's there. They look at you. And in a community, a lot of times, I help my wife with her organization. We go to many underprivileged communities and we help them. And even that little glimpse or that little glimpse they have of me, some kids, a lot of times they look up to me because they see me as maybe someone that they could be. Because they live uh, in a poor community, and then they see us and they say, okay, you know what? Maybe I could one day be like you guys. Have a job and go to school and maybe help other people when they get older. So it's leadership could be anything. Even if you don't know it, you're probably a leader right now.
This is the part of leadership that it really just resonates at my core. And I love these parts in our conversation, especially on the podcast that we can have. I don't get to dive in it on every episode, but I think it's perfect, with the history that me and you have, and just knowing our families so well, and hearing you kind of speak on leadership from those points, from those roles that you carry as a husband, as a dad, as a grandpa. Supporting your wife in the community events and the multiple community events that you do. So thank you for sharing that, listeners. I want to speak with you for a little bit. If you're listening to the podcast, we just covered a part that was a different role in Ed's leadership. If you didn't catch it initially, I want you to go back and listen, and you're going to hear the shift in his tone when he speaks about his leadership at work, and he speaks about his leadership at home in his community. And I want you to catch that. I want you to catch that really quickly, because that's a natural tone shift that happened for him, which tells us a lot about where his core and why he does what he does at the end of the day, what's most important. And I think that's such an important thing. I'm getting a little bit inspired, I guess, in this moment, as that's important. That's an important thing to remember with the many roles that we have with work. At the end of the day, why we lead, and how we don't turn it off, how we don't kind of put that, pass that up, really stepping into that as a dad, as a grandpa, as a husband, and everything that you do in the community. Let's have some fun, brother. Let's have some fun. I got a fun
Okay.
bonus question if we can. Let's jump in it really quickly. If you could travel to anywhere in the world, all expenses paid, 2 weeks, take your family, have a bunch of fun, where would you go if you guys were leaving today?
Japan.
Japan. Tell me why.
Japan.
What would that trip be like? Okay, you're going to Japan, and what are you doing when you land?
Well, Japan, I've been there before, but my family hasn't. So I want them to experience how beautiful Japan is, how the culture is. And the first thing that I would do is get something to eat. Japan has the best food. It could be noodles, it could be sushi, or whatever you want. But just go grab whatever I could find. And I'm not saying a restaurant. I'm saying like one of those hole in the wall spots because those have the best food.
Right.
So Japan will be number one right now.
Man, see, that's it's things like that that come up on these podcasts. We've known each other for quite some time. I wouldn't have guessed that would have been your answer, but hearing that right now, that's probably the top of the list for mine and Jamie's too. So we definitely have to plan one Japan trip where the entire family goes out there and has some meals at those restaurants, like you said, right? So
Right.
I love it. I love it. Right on. Thanks for that. One last thing before we wrap up today on today's episode, I want to thank you guys for listening here. If you didn't check out the full episode on YouTube with bonus features there, go ahead and check it out. But if you're going ahead and you're watching today's episode at Leader Seeds, remember the whole purpose of Leader Seeds is to remember that we're here to put more shine on the seeds of leadership. We're not here to seek the harvest. You'll get the harvest when you plant the right seeds. And we hope that every episode that you listen to, you're able to capture a few seeds, because I know that in today's conversation, we learn a lot as Ed Nava was kind of sowing a bunch of leadership seeds in making a decision, in mental preparedness, and what he did when he started. The last thing I want to ask you, brother, before we kind of wrap up today's thing, is there any last, maybe a quote that you really love, or maybe a person that you learn a lot from in leadership? One last thing, if you had, before we wrap up today.
Well, the one thing that I learned, and I know that in the military, they always tell us to mission accomplishment and troop welfare. For me, I think it's the opposite. For me, it's you troop welfare and mission accomplishment. Because if you take care of your people, they'll take care of you and accomplish the mission.
That's a perfect way to kind of wrap up a great conversation today. Ed, thank you for a great conversation on Leader Seeds podcast. Everyone, my name is Paul Keller Mossman. Join us here. Keep watching these episodes. Keep listening to these episodes, because we'll keep growing as leaders in every role that we have in life. Thanks for today.
Thank you.